Hello and welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. Microsoft Mentors is designed to lift the lid on the career journeys of the most successful leaders in the Microsoft ecosystem and to share their knowledge, insights, experience and expertise with the wider Microsoft community, offering mentorship at scale. Each week I'll be having open and honest conversations with technology leaders, business owners and technical experts from across the world of Microsoft tech and unpicking their past routes to success, their current models for personal and professional growth and advising you on how to develop the next steps of your cloud career. Stay tuned every week, every Wednesday at midday on LinkedIn Live and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Let's grow together. This week on Microsoft Mentors, the podcast, I am joined by Rue Campbell. Rue is a Microsoft MVP for security, specifically identity and access and SIEM and XDR. He's also a LinkedIn Learning and instructor and an author, and currently working as the Microsoft Security Practice Lead at Microsoft Partner of the Year winner, ThreatScape. In our conversation, we dive into Rue's current role and what that looks like in helping organisations overcome their security challenges. We explore his pathway into MVP and hopefully some lessons in there for anyone looking to become an MVP. We talk about his past career. We talk about the future of security in the Microsoft space. And of course, we fired him through the Microsoft Mentors Quickfire round. Hello, and welcome to a rather warm Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. I'm down in the sunny Midlands. It is a temperate 25 degrees. I'm joined by Rue Campbell, who is in a not quite so climate, Scotland.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's about 13 or 14 degrees here, which basically means it's boiling by our standards. But it's good to join you, Ollie. Thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. And so for anyone that hasn't come across Rue before, Rue is an MVP for Microsoft. He's also Microsoft Security Lead at ThreatScape. And so what I thought we'd do to start with today, Rue, is just, I guess, get a little bit of a feeling as to where you're at now in your career and then dive into sort of how you got there. So I guess to start off on the MVP side of things, how long have you been an MVP?
You know, someone asked me this question like a few days ago and I was like, I can't remember. But no, I finally remembered. So I've been an MVP for just coming up for 3 years. I got the award in 2021 and I think I've been renewed twice now to make this my third year. And it's been good. It's been fun.
Yeah, awesome. And specifically within the MVP program, because I know it breaks down into the different areas, where specifically does your MVP status sit?
Sure. So I'm in the security category, which covers a whole bunch of stuff, but specifically for me, that's SIEM and XDR, which basically just means defender, and then also identity and access, which basically means Entra. So those are two of the things that I work day in, day out with, and they're the kind of stuff that I do blogs about and videos about, hence why I'm in those categories. Yeah.
Well, good categories to be in, because they are probably two of the fastest moving areas within Microsoft security products, aren't they? They've changed a lot, obviously Entra changing from Azure AD. Was that last year, was it? And obviously a lot of work happening and new products coming out in the XDR space as well.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you're right as far as the whole name change of Azure AD to Entra. That was a bit of a shake-up. And even Defender, it went through a fair share of name changes as well. Half the job of an MVP is just communicating to people, hey, here's the old name and here's the new name. At least that's kind of what it feels like at times. But no, you're right. It's there's a lot of stuff going on in these fields. Entra, for example, I described it to a colleague earlier today as just like, there's no end to an Entra project. It's just you start going down that rabbit hole of keeping your identity secure and using single sign-on and all the rest of it. And it's like, that's a full-time job right there. So it's a good space to be in.
Yeah, it's funny what you say about the name change. I remember being at, I think it was the Microsoft South Coast Summit, and the Entra name change had just come in, and there were so many people where they were going through their slide deck and they're like, oh, I've got Azure AD there, I need to change that. And just going through their decks and realising that they still, even though they'd been through and changed most of it to Entra, there were still bits in there that would go, no, still got Azure AD in there somewhere.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And it's funny because there's loads of blogs I have done that still get a lot of views, but they use the old names. So people kind of have to build up this internal translation dictionary where they know it's the same thing, but there's a little moment where you're like, oh yeah, that means this. And even after I released my book, which would have been probably about this time last year, basically months after that, they went and rebranded all of Defender, and I'm like, oh great, there's a lot of trees and paper that can go to waste now.
yeah, that's the problem, isn't it, with more traditional media and cloud technologies, is that they do move so quickly, and there's, like we're saying, so many name changes, product changes, that it is quite easy for that traditional media with books and magazines and things like that to become obsolete quite quickly, isn't it, really?
Yeah, you're right. And then kind of the way I look at it is I don't think they're going to go away, but for me, the traditional written word type of media, like your books and even ebooks and things like that, you just have to focus on the fundamentals, right? Rather than the stuff that's going to change day in, day out, you focus on those fundamentals so that when things do change, someone's at least got that firm foundation to then help them understand the monthly and daily changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, obviously, been an MVP now for a couple of years, and then your sort of day-to-day working life is at ThreatScape. So, it'd be good to tell us a little bit about ThreatScape, your journey there in terms of into your current role, what that all looks like, Ray.
Sure. So, ThreatScape, we describe ourselves as pure play cybersecurity. So, unlike many, if not most, Microsoft partners, we don't focus on the kind of the what we would describe as the distractions of things like Teams and all that kind of stuff and Dynamics. We'll help customers secure them, but we're not the implementers of these types of things, right? And that allows us to be really clear in our focus, which is just making sure that whatever you're doing, whatever license you've bought, whatever product you've decided you're going all in on, we want to help you get the security that comes with that, right? And a big part of that is in the Microsoft cloud. So that would be securing Microsoft Azure. And my area of expertise is securing Microsoft 365. So we help customers with that journey of, if you're paying a lot for that Azure resource or that 365 E3 or E5 license, I just want to help customers grab that license and squeeze every drop of security out of it, right? Because it costs a lot of money, and I want to make sure folks are getting bang for their buck. Plus just the fact that when you move to the cloud, the attack surface is so massive. And so that's one of the things that we do at ThreatScape, is help customers understand the risks and then make their own decisions and informed decisions about, well, what am I going to do about that risk? And very recently, we just won in Ireland Microsoft Security Partner of the Year, which was quite... it was great for us, for obvious reasons, because it's Security Partner of the Year. Just the name alone of it sounds pretty badass. But then also just because it really spoke to what we're doing, right? We're taking customers that are maybe in not the best security postures, and we're radically transforming them and improving their maturity. And so me and my team of, I think we're 8 cybersecurity consultants now in my little Microsoft team. We're doing that day in, day out, just kind of helping folks stay on top of stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? I was having a conversation the other day with someone about the gap that a lot of organisations have in terms of what they're paying for through their Microsoft licenses and what they're actually leveraging. And it sounds like for you, it's about going in, right, so we can see, Mr. Customer, you are already using X and Y license. Let's make sure we're using all of the native security features within that to get the most out of it and build the most secure environment for you. And then out the back of that, if there's still gaps and there's still risk, then we can look at what other avenues there are around it.
100%, yes. So, at ThreatScape, we don't just do Microsoft. I only do Microsoft, with a few exceptions. But ThreatScape as a whole, we're multi-vendor. And that kind of helps us pick out, well, what are the weak spots in the Microsoft offering, and therefore how can we complement it? And so, to your point, you're spot on insofar as what kills me is when I'm doing an incident response and customer gets compromised, their mailbox gets breached or something like that, and I'm like, you were licensed for the tool that would have prevented this, right? And I see that all the time, and it's just soul destroying. So it's one of my motivators day in, day out, is just help folks actually realize, oh, wait a second, we're getting a ton of security with this license. Why not use it?
Yeah, absolutely. And for you guys at ThreatScape, and I guess more generally across, cybersecurity and Microsoft security, what would you say are some of the common challenges or key challenges that most organizations face that you work with them on?
Sure. So I guess it depends how far, it depends at what level do we want to talk about that. I think at the root of all the problems, not all the problems, but the vast majority of problems, it's just the pure complexity of when you move to the cloud. And when I say complexity, I mean that all of a sudden your attack surface is kind of the entire internet because you're not sitting behind a nice tidy firewall. I mean that the pace of things is relentless. Like, I was just going through the message center about an hour before we got on the call here, and I felt like I was scrolling through the updates in the message center for about an hour, and I'd only gone back 3 days worth of new things that were coming down the pipeline. So just that unrelenting pace of change and new features and vulnerabilities that come with that, that's the root cause, really, of what I'm seeing. That said, the mechanisms for what actually result in people's getting compromised, they're quite familiar, right? They're slightly different, but they're the same things that have kind of been happening for a long time. So we're talking about phishing, we're talking about malware, we're talking about users getting compromised because of those two things. You know what I mean? That in itself, that hasn't changed much. All that's changed is how the adversaries are actually going about that.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? That the actual mechanisms probably haven't changed too much, but their route of attack, and like you say, that attack surface has changed massively with the advent of sort of public cloud technologies. Cool. And then you mentioned, so you've got a sort of a team of 8 now, did you say, in the sort of the Microsoft security pod there? So what's your sort of interaction with that team look like from a leadership standpoint in terms of you and that team? What does your sort of management structure look like for you personally within that?
Sure. Well, geez, I guess you'd probably need to ask the team. They may say, what management structure might be the first question that comes to mind. No, look, what I try to be is as hands off as possible, because the team that I and ThreatScape have built is just honestly like second to none. Like, I have so much confidence in my team to just do the right thing constantly, right? And always offer the best advice to the customer and always give them the highest level of professionalism with their implementations and their recommendations and things like that. That said, where I do try and help the team out is things like, personal development or fighting their corner if something comes up, right? And just being that sounding board where it's like, okay, I need to thrash an idea off you. I can be that sounding board and help you out with that. But I guess, one of the things I am trying to help is go on that kind of MVP journey, the career development journey, and all that kind of stuff. Whether or not I'm any good at it, you'd have to ask the team, but I'm trying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things, isn't it? I think, like you say, it sounds like you've got a team of people that are sort of very capable by the sounds of it, and it's just probably more about those incremental gains and those incremental sort of improvements in their skill set and their knowledge, rather than having to do massive leaps and bounds of absolute new skill set builds out by the sounds of it.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's fair to say. I mean, I've got folks in my team that have joined me at, I guess you could call it, kind of junior levels of their, not necessarily their career, but their career in consultancy. When you make that leap into being an outsourced provider and being a consultant, the skill level required is quite a bit higher because customers have higher expectations of you for obvious reasons. So we have brought people into our team at that more junior level, but it's like it's really nice to see sometimes where it's like you bring them in at a level you think they're at, and very quickly it becomes obvious to you, oh wait a second, you're actually way up here. You know what I mean? It's like a duck taken to water, and you just see that natural ability to communicate complex ideas into nice simple language that customers understand and can buy into. And it's a beautiful thing to see. So we've got a lot of people in our team that have started at that level, but very quickly they move up and they move up and they move up.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, isn't it? Like, say, within that outsourced consultancy world, the technical side of things is obviously one piece, and it's a massively important bit. But also, those consultancy skills, that softer skill set, is so important. You've got to be able to talk to a customer, understand the customer's pain points, sometimes be challenged by the customer and know how to interact with that, sometimes be able to challenge the customer in the right way. So that soft side of a consultant skill set, I always think it's much more difficult to measure, especially when you're going through things like interview processes, etc. But it's so important once they're in the real world of the job.
Yes, totally agree. It's its own art and craft, to be honest, and the way that you handle things is almost more important than your actual technical ability, right? Your ability to cope under pressure or with difficult customers, to be able to answer difficult questions in a way that isn't just a knee-jerk response and you end up fumbling about, right? It's that ability to just kind of take a little space and say, let me think about that. Okay, here's what I think we should do. It's that, it's just the professionalism that you try to deliver to the customer, because in the security world anyway, we will quite often be dealing with customers who are having a pretty bad time, right?
Yeah, I was about to say that you probably engage with customers when they're potentially having their worst day in IT they've ever had.
100%. And look, it's all just about bringing that level of coolness to the table, right? Pun intended, because I'm aware it's very, very hot right now. So it's about doing that. But then also, when you're, maybe if you're not in the heat of incident response and you're more just kind of proactive in project management and preparing a customer's security rather than actually dealing with an incident, it's just about having a degree of empathy, because my experience with some security consultants, and I don't want to mudsling, but it's true, is that they look at things far too black and white. There's no nuance. There's right and there's wrong. There's a degree of fanboyism that comes with the Microsoft world, right? Insofar as everything has to be cloud, everything has to be Copilot, everything has to be the newest, latest thing that Microsoft are shouting about. But in the real world, you're going to contend with customers who aren't ready to make that drop yet, or they have very good reasons why they can't do that. And it's about understanding those reasons, but then still trying to steer the customer in a way that's going to better serve them and their organizational needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's, I guess, a really good picture of right now and sort of where your career is currently. It'd be good to understand the journey that you've gone on to get to this point. So where I always like to, and I think it gives some really good insight in terms of how people first get into tech. So with yourself, what did that initial, or where did that initial interest in technology come from? Was it from a very early age? Did it come later in life for education? What did that all look like for yourself, Ray?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was always like a lot of folks that stumble into IT, I was always the one that was kind of good with computers. You know what I mean? Like every family's got the one that's like, oh, this is broken, drag it over here. Didn't matter if it was a computer or just anything that plugged in. You know what I mean? That was kind of where I landed. And then eventually I get to the end of high school and I hate it and I want to leave high school. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to leave high school, you either got to get a job or you go to college. Didn't want to get a job. So I'll go to college, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm reasonably good with computers, do computing at college. So did a couple of years of that, eventually went to university, got the degree, kind of enjoyed it, got my first job, kind of in an entry-level help desk / jack of all trades type position. Stuck that out for a while, got into the team lead / management side of the same business, stuck that out a while, had a bit of an interest in leaving story there, but eventually I stumbled into consultancy, and the rest is history. You know what I mean? I think like as soon as I got into consultancy, it was just, it completely changed my life. You know what I mean? It's like, I kind of jokingly describe it as going from like, what's it called? Wizard of Oz, where you stumble out of the black and white and go into the world of color. You know what I mean? It's just, it's really transformed my life. And what I try to do is give a little bit of that back, right, through blogs and YouTube and books and all the rest of it.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like you started through that college journey into an entry level tech role. It sounds like that's a fairly similar pathway to where a lot of people come, where it's general support across different technologies. For you, at what point did you start to specialize into the security space, and did that start off sort of generally in security? Did that quickly or immediately go into Microsoft security? What was that sort of specialization point in your career? When did that start?
Yeah, sure. So I guess specializing probably like 6 or so years. But it's one of those things where if you're doing IT administration, right, if you're being a good sysadmin, you're kind of doing it all the time, right? Grant, you'll be juggling a whole bunch of stuff at the same time, but it's all going to have that security wrapper. So it's always been something that's interesting for me, even since I think back to just as I was starting at college, kind of leaving high school, going into college, and I got like a few books. Like I got like the Kevin Mitnick books, and I got the code book and a few other ones about just general encryption and things like that. And it's like, this is actually kind of interesting and kind of fun. So it's always been there in the background for me. I've never been someone that purely cared about business applications or purely cared about productivity apps. I've always had that kind of security thing bubbling under me as well.
Yeah, like you say, in the best case scenario, most organisations or any organisation really should be approaching that everything to do with IT is also to do with security, isn't it? But we know that that's not always the case, and that's where issues start to happen. Cool. And I guess during that sort of early phase of your career, are there any standout moments for you where you were like, where there was maybe a person or a mentor or someone that you worked alongside that was like, okay, this guy or girl gets me, they're really supportive, and someone that really helped you in that early phase of your career? Because a lot of the time I find that seems to be quite important to people.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there's definitely a few folks that come to mind. Both my IT manager at the time, who I reported to as that kind of entry-level position, and the commercial director of the business, I think they offered me a lot of good mentorship and guidance, you know what I mean? Kind of help me understand IT as part of the business rather than just IT. I really went through, it's kind of like anyone that leaves the world of education and stumbles into business, you start to realize how the real world actually works, right? And so I learned about the general commercial operations of a business, from invoicing to sales to forecasts, all that kind of stuff, right? And that really helped me. I think eventually when I moved into consultancy, because it helped me apply kind of commercial head to a lot of stuff as well. So they come to mind. And then eventually as I got on in my internal IT and I moved into the kind of consultancy side of the fence, I worked in a big consultancy team at the time. And I had guys like Peter Rising, who's another MVP, and he really took me under his wing and kind of helped me find my feet as a consultant there. So yeah, it's how would you put it? There is a lot of times in IT where you're kind of out there on your own and you're just struggling to figure out stuff yourself. You can't avoid that, but there are a lot of people out there that are willing to give up their time, right, and help you, and they'll just do it because they feel it's the right thing to do. You know what I mean? It's kind of like asking you shall receive when it comes to the kind of help and mentorship that's out there.
Yeah, definitely. And you're slowly morphing into a younger version of Pete Risen with the beard and everything. Taking on Pete's style advice as well as his technical advice.
Indeed. It's funny, when the first time Pete ever seen me, he said, "Oh my God, I've been completely outbearded." And I think there's a little bit of a measuring going on there with the beards. That said, he's got the long hair now. I recently cut my hair off. I used to have really long hair, so we've swapped places there. But it's there's definitely a type of look for a lot of folk in IT, and I probably got that kind of generic IT guy look going for me.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with a few people, and I think one thing, and obviously, where you're at with your MVP and Pete and people like that, I think with the Microsoft community, both the MVP community and the wider community with user groups and all the moving parts within it, it's actually a really collaborative community. And even if you don't have necessarily a technical mentor in your business for whatever reason. Maybe you're the only, the only IT person in the business. There are mechanisms where you can tap into the wider community and get that same sort of support. And I think that's fairly unique, I would say, in the Microsoft community versus, the wider tech community. The Microsoft, especially in the UK, is right up there when it comes to community collaboration and engagement.
Yeah, I agree. I can't speak too much for other vendors, but I mean, certainly, the community piece, it comes from Microsoft themselves, right? The MVP program, the people that lead that, like in the UK, Claire, who leads it, a whole bunch of stuff to do with like student outreach and mentorship and all that kind of stuff. So it does come straight from the top within Microsoft. And I would say it's one of the, in hindsight, what it's like, you look back at your career and you're like, oh, what could I have done to maybe speed things up in the past? And for me, number one, 100% is community involvement. Just putting yourself out there, putting your blogs out there, talking to people on LinkedIn, Twitter, any of that you can do. It just acts as an accelerator to everything else you're already doing.
Yeah, so I guess for anyone that would, is working in the Microsoft space, is interested in being involved in the community side of things, when you started the pathway towards MVP, what did that route and journey look like to you from when you maybe started doing stuff to when you eventually got MVP as a bit of maybe a roadmap for people that might be wanting to try to achieve it themselves in the future?
Sure. Well, the main thing that comes to mind is, and it's a common misconception, is you'll know this, but it's an award, right? It's something you get for being recognized by Microsoft for doing stuff rather than a certification. So although you need to be highly skilled and technical because, IT is technical, that's not the be all and end all of it, right? You don't sit an exam or anything like that. So for me, it all came through things like I was doing a podcast at the time. I was blogging. This was during the pandemic. So like everyone else, I had nothing better to do. So I was doing like 2 blogs a week at one point. The podcast, I started to write a book. So just a whole bunch of stuff that puts yourself out there. And the way I would tell folks to look at it is just look at it as win-win. You know what I mean? Whenever you're trying to teach yourself something, whenever you're trying to remember something or really master something, write it out. Because when you write it out in a blog, it helps you think and it helps you understand. And then as soon as you've cracked that for yourself, share it with everyone else. Because, I always had the thought that, someone else has blogged about this, so what's the point of me doing it? Well, because they'll stumble upon your blog instead of that other person's blog. You know what I mean? There's the internet in the world is big enough for a whole bunch of ideas and a whole bunch of thoughts. You might as well put yours out there and hopefully something sticks.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, there's so much great content out there that there's no reason that everyone can't be involved and there isn't a place for everyone's content in different guises. And with the MVP now you've had that for a few years, typically, if you looked at a month, how much time would you say you spend monthly on blogs and podcasts and things like that to help maintain that sort of commitment to the community through the MVP award?
Geez, good question. I'm a bit of an obsessive, so I might not be typical. I would say on the whole, outside of the core 9 to 5 job, I'm probably still doing about 5 hours a week of different stuff, right? I get up kind of early and I just put in about an hour or two before work on catching up with stuff, either just random posts on social media, or we've got a second edition of a book coming out, so I'm working on that, courses, all that kind of stuff, right? So again, I don't think the expectation is that you would have to do it at that level, but that's roughly what I'm at for it.
Yeah. Cool. No, it's good little roadmap for people to understand what it is and what it is. 'Cause especially, I think it was probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago when a lot of the MVP renewals came out, LinkedIn was flooded with everyone with their MVP buzz. And I was thinking in the background, it'd be interesting to know what all those routes were, so that if someone sat on the other side going, I want to be able to do my MVP buzz post at some point in the future, that they know the route towards it.
Yeah, no, cool. It's a good point. Yeah, and I guess one thing I would say is if anyone number one, don't underestimate the time and effort that goes into it, and a lot of it is out of your control, right? But also, if you ever do win that award, or you ever get re-rewarded it, like a lot of folks just did, whatever you do, please don't post honoured and humbled on Twitter or LinkedIn, because I will mute you, because if I have to see another post that says honoured and humbled to be an MVP, I'll probably throw up. But that's just... That's just the old British kind of thing kicking in, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. And then, so we've had a look at your current, we've had a look at sort of your route to that and the route to MVP. I guess moving forwards over the next, if we look to the next 12, 18 months roadmap, specifically within sort of the Microsoft security landscape, where do you see which parts of those roadmaps are you most excited about, and where are the really key wins that you think organisations are going to be able to have with that over the next couple of years?
Oh, good question. So I guess one of the big trends that I'm helping folks out with, and I think is really important, is the move to passwordless, right? So at the minute, we're kind of at this weird, annoying stage where we've got to deal with passwords and we've got to deal with MFA. Yeah. The general trend that Microsoft are doing a fantastic job of getting us there with is passwordless, where essentially I use a security key or I just use my phone and I don't need to worry about my password. And for a whole bunch of reasons that I won't get too much into, this is better for protection against phishing and credential compromise and a whole bunch of stuff. And we are, passwords have been with us for decades and decades now. They're not going to go away overnight. We're right at the beginning of this journey. But if someone is thinking, well, what's an area I could skill up in to get a head start and potentially, invest my career in, to me, that is a big, big, big point, because you can improve people's quality of life by, hey, if you don't have to worry about a password anymore. But at the same time, you can improve their security, right? So that's one of the big ones that comes to mind. And then probably the second one, and it kills me to say it, is going to be generative AI, right? It's not going anywhere. I think, I'm kind of like, I would say this because it's kind of my position on it. I think there's going to be real value in employees / consultants / just folks online who can help disseminate the hype and the buzz and the marketing from the reality, right? Because none of these AI platforms are particularly cheap, right? There's a lot of money that they're asking for in a lot of these. And I think if you can be the person in your company that helps identify what's the actual use cases for this, how can we save money in it, versus, hey, we just jumped on the wagon and it's actually costing us more money than we're bringing in return productivity. Again, I think that could be massive for people to really be that kind of go-to person.
Yeah, because I guess when you put those two worlds together, and I'm sure there's products that are already starting to push it that way, you'd think that in the security world, there will be some big integration with AI on the alerting and monitoring side of things, and almost get AI to fuel some of that, or do some of the heavy lifting in terms of the alerting and monitoring bit, automatically fix some stuff in the background where it can, and then push it out to a human to do the more sort of complex piece. Really is probably where you'll see a lot of the technology and products going, won't we?
Yeah, you're right. And you see a lot of security operations centers, or SOCs. They're tier 1 / tier 2. They're able, and often now they're investing, or they're currently able to heavily automate that through various types of AI. So they'll either have their own proprietary models, or they'll be using something like Copilot for security. But again, these are not particularly mature platforms yet, right? We're right at the beginning of this. Long term, thinking 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, I do think, to your point, we will see far more of the AI doing the actual remediation, right? At the minute, it's more about helping lower the noise and summarize things for me. In the future, It seems like it's going to take a little bit of a more proactive approach. At the minute, there's not the appetite for that, right? Because we're still scared that that Skynet is going to take over the world. So we're not quite there yet. But
it still might, bro. It still might. We never know.
I'm on board for it. I think it'd be a hoot. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, I always like those sort of more conspiracy led thoughts around AI just because it feels like we're at the very start of a sci-fi movie, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And look, sometimes with AI, you really are blown away by what it can do, and then other times you look at it and you're like, "This is just the dumbest thing I've ever seen," right? And I think, or I hope that over time we'll see way more of the former and less of the latter.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've spoken all the way through the conversation about the rate of change with technology generally, but specifically with cloud technologies and Microsoft security technologies. So for you personally, and I guess wider for your team at ThreatScape, how do you guys challenge sort of staying on top of that rapid, ever evolving technology landscape? What are your sort of go-to resources and your own personal approach to staying on top of all that change?
Sure. So there's not just one thing, right? There's a whole bunch of things I do to stay on top. Part of my responsibilities at ThreatScape, because we offer a service that kind of helps our customers stay on top of stuff, is, well, I have to stay on top of stuff and implement that into our service. A large part of that, frankly, is just social media, right? So Twitter or X, LinkedIn, if you get the right network, get the right contacts, the people who are real kind of on top of things within our little bubble, they're fantastic at keeping you up to speed on things that you need to be aware of. And then secondary to that, for me, it's things like the message center. And frankly, a lot of it is just me going into the admin portals and playing about with stuff and saying, okay, well, this is different. No one else has noticed it's different. I better investigate this and talk to some product managers and see what's going on here, right? So a whole bunch of things kind of culminate into that. Unfortunately, it's there's not just one page you can go to and find out everything that's changed, right? You really have to do a lot of juggling and reading to keep on top.
Yeah. It's just knowing where the right and reliable sources are, aren't they? I think everyone gets their own little feed. They almost build your own feed, don't you? Right, I'll go and check this for that. I'll go and check that for this particular technology stack or this particular area. And it's just building your own sort of recess pool that you can go and draw on when you need to find out what's happening, really.
Yep.
And then if you were if we're looking at someone that's maybe earlier in their IT career, maybe Rue when he's in that sort of more general sysadmin job, but someone that wants to get towards cyber or cloud security in the future, what would your sort of advice be for them to sort of navigate that transition from being maybe more generalist in IT to being more security focused?
I had a discussion about this with Yuri Diogenes, who's principal PM at Microsoft, and he oversees a lot of Defender for Cloud, which is a big thing within Microsoft Azure. And one of the things that came across in the discussion I had with him, and is exactly the answer to this question, is the cost for upskilling in the world of cybersecurity is probably far lower than it is than tons of industries out there, right? Because we have the benefit of sitting at home and using our home computer or using something that exists in the cloud. If I'm a lawyer or a doctor or a joiner, I need to go out there and I need to get my hands on physical stuff, right? Or I need to sit a bar exam or stuff like this, right? So the cost is quite high. If I'm at home, all I need is 5 or 6 spare hours, a completely average computer, a free Azure trial, and all of a sudden I can just pour my time and intensity into it, right? And so I do think that is one of the big pieces of advice I give folks is leverage all the free stuff that's available and then kind of just don't stop. To me, to differentiate yourself and really level up, you just have to become obsessive. And I don't see any other way about it. It's about figuring out, okay, well, what am I struggling with? What can I not find anyone else telling me how to do? Well, you know what? No one else has cracked this. No one else is sharing how to do it. I'll be the one that does it, right? I'll get to the bottom of it. And I will just stress and I'll suffer and I'll hate it and I'll put myself through my paces, and it might take hours, days, or weeks for me to finally wrap my head around this and find a way to very clearly articulate how folks should deal with this problem. But I'll do it. and I'll just suffer through it. And then when you finally get there, you share it with the world, and you get the kind of, honestly, you get the respect and the community notice that comes with that. And to me, that's what helps folks these days, make that leap into a different part of their career. If I'm a jack of all trades IT person and I want to jump into cyber, well, maybe I just start blogging about cyber and sharing it on LinkedIn and all the rest of it. And all of a sudden I'm doing something that differentiates me from other candidates, right? It's about kind of doing as much as you can to prove to your current employer or your next employer or whoever it is that I'm a safe set of hands and I'm interested in this and I know what I'm talking about. And having a blog, a YouTube, any of that kind of stuff. You couldn't really do that 10 years ago, at least not as easily as you can now. So that's, to me, is just such a big thing that folks should be doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never really thought of like you say, that analogy between being a lawyer or a doctor versus the ability that you can get hands-on in a lab setting so easily and for free in Microsoft Cloud. And it's about going in and like you say, if that's the direction that you want to go with your career, is putting the time aside to go and do that, because you can go and play around with it and get it wrong and learn from your mistakes, whereas it's not so easy to do that if you're trying to practice to be a heart surgeon or whatever.
Yes, yeah, you're right. And look, the other thing to keep in mind is that, what would you say? It's not true all the time, but this is supposed to be fun, right? I mean, cybersecurity, IT, you can make it fun, right? You have to lean into a certain geeky aspect of your personality, right? But that's the whole point. So just try and, I don't know, take it seriously, but do the thing that interests you the most. And as soon as you find that one little thing, you're like, oh, you know what, that's actually kind of interesting. To me, just dive right in there and become the go-to person in your little bubble. And that kind of sets you up quite well for a promising career.
Absolutely. No, great advice, Roo. Great advice. So we're going to dive into Microsoft Mentors Quickfire round now, mate.
Okay.
So
go for it.
On your toes. So it'll be roughly 10 questions. We'll try and keep answers short. I normally say one sentence, but sometimes they go a little bit longer. Sometimes they're one word. So let's see how we get on. So the first question, and I know the big question that everyone wants to know, is how long has it taken to grow the beard?
Like 10 years, I think. It's just pure laziness, by the way. I think that's 2 sentences.
No style, no choice apart from just it's easier to let it grow.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Swinging back to something a bit more topical, what would you say gut feeling response is one of, or the biggest, most common security mistake that organizations make?
Trusting the defaults.
Oh, so as in trusting the default settings and not changing it at all.
Yeah, there's a t-shirt going about called "Don't Trust the Defaults" or something like that, and it's so true. Like, a lot of stuff is secure by default, but most of it kind of sucks. So you got to get in there in the settings and just tinker about with it.
Yeah. If you hadn't been a technologist or worked in tech, what do you think you would have done instead?
Probably economics, something equally geeky.
Yeah. No, I like it. Be an interesting one to be working in economics and analysing everything that's gone over in the last couple of years, wouldn't it? But
yeah, yep. Say that again.
We spoke about resources that you dig into. Have you got a favourite or a couple of favourite podcasters, whether that's technical or non-technical, or influencers, social media streams? Who are your sort of go-to people in that sort of space for information, whether it's tech or non-tech?
Sure. So in terms of podcasts, one of the main ones that comes to mind is Microsoft Security Insights Show. That's run by Rod Trent and some other folks at Microsoft. It's really good at keeping you up to date with all that type of stuff. So anyone that's interested in the kind of stuff I'm talking about, I'd recommend go out and listen to that.
Cool. Outside of the working life, outside of Microsoft Tech, and not including the 5 hours, 6 hours that you spend beaver on blogs and stuff like that. Have you got any other hobbies or interests outside of the working world?
Well, as of December, I've become a dad, so I got a little baby that is probably the biggest hobby. You don't have any hobbies after you have kids, as I have learned. But other than that, just usual dorky and geeky stuff. Plus, I live right beside a national park in Scotland, so walks, water, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, none of which you can enjoy with a newborn. Gotta wait a little bit.
Yeah, correct.
No, and we'll go for one last question, and I really like this question. I always think it tells you a little bit about people. So it's Friday night, you've had a hard day or hard week at work. What takeaway choice are you going for?
That is the toughest question I have ever been asked in my career. I would probably go for a good Scottish seaside sausage supper from the chip shop. There you go. That's nice. That used to always be my reward when I did good at school. In what do you call them? Parent teacher meeting type thing. I'd always get a sausage supper. And then after I started doing Microsoft exams, I would always treat myself to one of those if I passed, because I'm usually reasonably disciplined with my diet. But yeah, that's got to go for that.
Yeah, no, can't beat a good British chippy, can you?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for your time, Ru. It's been really interesting learning a little bit more about you, a bit more about ThreatScape and your career and some advice for people looking to grow in their cloud career. I mean, in terms of your blogs and your own sort of podcast stuff, where can people find all of that stuff?
Sure. Kind of all over the place. If you just search Ru Campbell MVP, you'll find me anywhere. Twitter, LinkedIn. I got a new course out on LinkedIn, by the way, so I got to plug that on Defender for Endpoint. And then the other thing that any listeners who are interested in the kind of stuff I'm talking about might be interested in is I on a monthly meetup. So that's really good for career development. We have 2 speakers every month join us. It's something we call the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance User Group. Completely free, 2 hours every month, and folks learn a hell of a lot at that. So if you just search M365 Security and Compliance User Group, you can join us at that every month as well.
Brilliant. And is that user group remote, is it, or in person?
Correct, yes. Sorry, yes. So to clarify that, it's on Teams, completely remote, completely free. We don't record it though, so you got to show up because we're trying to build a little community. You know what I mean? So that's the whole idea there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll make sure that I grab all those handles off you for a few of those bits, and we'll make sure that they go out alongside the podcast. So yeah, Ru, thanks very much for your time, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
Cool. Appreciate it, Ollie. Thank you.